What's going on, everybody? It's AG here. So week 1 is officially in the books of the college football season. Now, we still do have one game tomorrow night, Boston College and Florida State, but that's not going to have any impact on my top 25 for week 2. So I figured I'd go ahead and reveal it because Florida State is bumped out of the rankings for now. So my week 2 top 25, we have had some movement. We'll start at number 25, West Virginia. So I realized West Virginia did lose to Penn State, but I'm pretty high on Penn State, and I would much rather a team schedule a tough week 1 game and lose rather than beat up on a FBS or FCS school, like Oregon did and struggle. So I hats off to West Virginia for scheduling that game. That's not an easy game playing Penn State. And Penn State's going to be talented this year, but West Virginia, despite losing by 3 touchdowns, there's a lot of teams in college that will lose by 3 touchdowns to them. But West Virginia has a high-flying offense. Garrett Greene is pretty good at quarterback. I think they still have a chance to win the Big 12. And with the new playoff, they're going to be fine going forward, even with a loss to Penn State. Number 24, Rutgers. Okay, so they enter the top 25 for me. I'm pretty high on this team this year. First off, go look at their schedule. They have a very manageable schedule. They could easily be in the top 25 the entire season with no issues. But the reason for that, reason I kind of have optimism about them, Kyle Monunga at running back led the Big Ten at rushing last year. They returned a lot of guys. They're a year older. They should be kind of a sleeper pick in the Big Ten. Number 23, Georgia Tech. Okay, so they had that week 0 win over Florida State. That's kind of the reason they were here. Nothing impressive this week, really, but they did have that win last week. Haynes King and Georgia Tech stay in the top 25 once again. Number 22, Texas A&M. So similar to West Virginia, I thought A&M looked competitive against Notre Dame despite the loss. Notre Dame is a top 10 team, so it's not just a terrible loss. Now, it was at home. It's not a neutral site game, so you do want to win those. But if they can get their offense figured out, I think they'll be fine. Their defense looked okay, but Connor Wyman at quarterback, I wasn't super impressed despite him being a first-round caliber quarterback according to a lot of guys. But I think A&M will be fine going forward. I didn't have them on top 25, actually, so they actually entered the top 25 with a loss. Number 21, NC State. So they dropped a lot for me. I had them closer to top 10 than I did top 20. But NC State kind of struggled this past week. They have a lot of transfers coming in. Grayson McCall at quarterback, Waters at running back from Duke. I think they're going to be fine going forward. We'll know a lot about them this week. They are, I think, going to be a contender in the ACC for sure. They play Tennessee this week, though, so we should know a lot about them pretty soon. Number 20, Kansas State. I'm not completely sold on Kansas State, I'll admit. They have Avery Johnson at quarterback. Chris Kleiman has proven he can win a lot of ball games there. I'm not completely sold on them yet, though. They play Tulane this week. That's a tough group of 5 matchup, so we'll see how that goes. Number 19, Utah. So Cam Rising is back for Utah. They've still got a good tight end. They've still got Cam Rising. They still got Kyle Whittingham. They're going to be a force in the Big 12. I think they could win it this year. As you can see, there's not just a ton of Big 12 teams on here, and they're all kind of actually right in this little 3 right here. So I think Utah will be fine, but we're not going to know a lot about them until we really get into the thick of the things in Big 12. They have Baylor this week. Number 18, Oklahoma State. Return a lot from last year's team that made the Big 12 championship. Didn't look super impressive in week 1, but they were pretty inconsistent last year. But they returned the majority of their team that, like I said, made the championship against Texas. So they're a year older. They still got Mike Gundy, still got Alan Bowman, still got Presley at receiver, still got the obvious one, Ollie Gordon at running back. They're going to be fine. I think they're the team to beat in the Big 12. Number 17, Louisville. They look good this week. They return not too much. They do bring in a lot of transfers, though, that have replaced some of the guys they lost. So they've borderline improved that roster. If you remember, they beat Notre Dame last year, made the ACC championship. Jeff Brom is going to have them as a consistent top 25 team. Number 16, Iowa. All right, so we know their defense is going to be good. If Cade McNamara can hit at quarterback, the Michigan transfer, he looked good in the second half this week. If he can hit, Iowa could be a sleeper to make the playoff with the way their schedule plays out. I'm curious to see once they play some tougher competition, though, how they'll look. Number 15, Michigan. So they started slow against Fresno State. Now, Fresno State is no slouch. I realize they're not a Power 4 school. They're a Group of 5 school, but still, Fresno State's not just terrible. They are a top 10, probably, Group of 5 school. But Michigan going to have to figure some things out. They do play Texas this week. That's not going to be easy. It is in Ann Arbor. That should benefit them a little bit. But Michigan, admittedly, was kind of surprising. Like, going into the year, I would have thought it was going to be a heavy dose. For them to be successful and win, it was going to be a heavy dose of Donovan Edwards and Alex Orji. Neither one of those things happened. Donovan Edwards didn't look very good, couldn't get going. Alex Orji didn't even start. So we'll see how they look against Texas. Number 14, LSU barely lost to USC there. Obviously, I hadn't talked about USC, but I will in a second. LSU didn't really move much for me. I thought they looked okay. They still have a lot of pieces to replace from last year, so it's going to take some time to figure things out. But if their offense can click, I think their defense is going to be just fine. Number 13, Clemson. Okay, so they did get kind of pounded by Georgia, but probably almost everybody on this list, minus probably the top 5, is going to get pounded by Georgia as well. So they were at least competitive in the first half, so that's why I didn't drop them too much. I think it was 6-0 at halftime. Cade Klubnik is going to have to figure some things out. That offense is going to have to figure some things out for them to have success going forward, because they're definitely in the thick of things when it comes to the ACC. But we saw this week there's a clear tier there between Georgia, which is one of those top teams in the country, and Clemson. Number 12, Oregon. They struggled this week. To be honest with you, this is pretty nice to put them in 12. I could have dropped them even further. Now it is just week 1. Okay, it's obviously you can't overreact after 1 week, but they did struggle against Idaho. Now their offense put up some really good numbers. Dillon Gabriel threw like 49 times and completed, I think, 41 of them or something. So he threw for a lot of yards, but they weren't just putting up points. So Oregon's gonna have to get some things figured out. They play Boise this week. I don't think Boise will beat them, but that is a game to watch at least on Saturday night. Number 11, Tennessee. So they moved up a little bit for me. Now, I didn't play anybody, Chattanooga, but Nico looked impressive, I thought, at quarterback. And last year, they weren't just terrible, even though they did have Joe Milton. It wasn't a terrible year despite not being as successful as the year before that. But if Nico can have consistent play, I think they'll be a top 15 team throughout the year. Number 10, USC. So they were probably the biggest riser here for me. They look good. All right. So I had them. It's either 23, 24, 25, somewhere in that range. I had them towards there, but they look good to me against LSU. Miller Moss looked the part. All right. He looked good again, as he did in the bowl game. But the main thing for me is their defense. Their defense looked pretty good. Looked like they were actually going to get after some people this year. Didn't just look like they were straight up relying on Caleb Williams for everything to get them a win. Actually, a little team football. I think Lincoln Riley is a good head coach, but he hasn't 100% looked at all the time at USC, but I think they'll be good this year. I don't think they're necessarily going to win the Big Ten, but I think they could have a say as far as the pecking order goes, just when it comes to the 2nd seed, 3rd seed, 4th seed, and so on. Number 9, Notre Dame. I was pretty impressed with them. Now, they did struggle a little bit against A&M, but A&M, again, at Kyle Field is not an easy win. A&M was even favored. But Riley Leonard, I think as long as he can stay healthy, Notre Dame should be a playoff team. Potential pitfalls, they still have USC. They do play them at the end of the year. I think they play Louisville and Florida State. So those are kind of the 3 games that if they can somehow manage those, or if USC stays good, you could even lose that game and still make the playoff. But I think Notre Dame's in good shape going forward. They look solid. Number 8, Missouri. This is more just going off of last year. All right, they were good last year. They returned enough production. They bring in a new running back, Marcus Carroll, to replace Cody Schrader. I think that offense is going to be fine. They've got a really easy SEC schedule. They'll be in the playoff. Number 7, Miami. So this is probably the biggest surprise to me, the biggest jumper. Actually, I said USC, but I think it might be Miami. They shocked me. Despite them meeting my top 25 last week and Florida not being, I thought Florida would beat them going to the swamp. I didn't think it would be easy, but Miami just beat the crap out of Florida. They looked apart. This is Mario Cristobal's most talented team he has had, and Cam Ward looks legit. Now, if he can keep what he had against Florida going, I think they could win the ACC and maybe even more going forward. They look good to me, so they enter my top 10. Number 6, Ole Miss. So Ole Miss returns a lot from last year. They're bringing a solid transfer class on defense. They should make the playoff as well. Number 5, Penn State. So I had them actually, I think at 5 or 4. I think I had them number 4, but I had one team jump them. So we'll talk about them in a little bit that moved up. But Penn State, I've been impressed with them so far as far as last year and just what they had coming back into this year. But they look good against West Virginia. Drew Roller looks like this is probably going to be his best year he has had. Their defense is stacked. I think they're going to have a say when it comes to the Big Ten title as far as them and Ohio State, Oregon, USC, somewhere in that order probably. Number 4, Ohio State. So I did have Ohio State number 1 last week. Now, it's not really anything they didn't do. Just I thought the other 3 teams looked more impressive to me. Ohio State, they ended up killing Akron, but in the first half, they struggled a little bit, at least out of the gates, But Will Howard, I think, will be fine. He has enough talent around him that he's going to throw for however many yards anyway, just because the talent surrounding him alone. Number 3, Alabama. Jalen Milroe looks like maybe your Heisman winner this year. He looks good. I had questions going in, about how his skill set's going to match with Kalen DeBoer's offense, but I think they're going to be fine. I think these top 3 teams, maybe Ohio State, you get thrown there, but I think they're just on a whole nother level than pretty much everybody else in the country. Number 2, Texas. So they are the one that rose. I had them behind Penn State last week, but they rose up for me here. They look good. They played Colorado State. Now, that's not a top 25 team, but it's at least a team you've heard of that is a, not a power 4 school, but a group of 5 school that's in the FBS. They're not playing a Division 2 team. They beat the crap out of Colorado State. The offense looked good. Defense looked good. Pretty much everything looked good there. And I had questions about not Quinn Ewers, but if they could replace all the surrounding pieces around him. Texas looks the part. Number 1, Georgia. I'll say, okay, so they killed Clemson. Pretty much enough said there. They are going to be number 1 probably until they struggle or another team just looks that dominant. But Georgia looks the part right now. They look like the number 1 team in the country, so that's why they're here. But that is my top 25. Who would you take? Who would you take out? Who would you put in? Also, who would you move down? Who would you move up? Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.